Okay, so this is lecture 2 on the topic of politics. And again, we're just going to talk about what we mean by the political system, not really going to get into any of the different political philosophies so much. In the last video, in the last lecture, I talked about what we mean by politics. Politics is the use of power. Political science is the science behind and the study of the use of power. Power is exercised through authority or coercion. You can read different kinds of, if you ever do any other research into like leadership studies, there's also talk about different kinds of leaders or different kinds of ways of exercising power. You have relational power, you have reward power, all of those other things, but they're all different kinds of power. So we listen to people, or we accept their ability, their right to tell us what to do or to influence people or to influence us. That's what we mean by authority, is that the author has the right to tell us what to do, and they have the right for us to expect to listen to them based on what we would call different types of authority. So this slide represents the 3 big types of authority from the sociological perspective. And then I have images of people associated with those different types of authority. That'd be a really fun that'd be a fun quiz, right? To show you some images and have you match them up with kinds of authority. And again, we're going to define authority as the ability or the power or the right to tell us what to do. So you have traditional authority, and traditional authority is thought of as a kind of an authority based on custom or tradition, right? So in this particular image, your example of authority would be Queen Elizabeth, because well, let me tell you what the rest of them are. Because you have rational legal authority, and that's a person that has the right to tell us what to do because of the position they hold. And it's strictly, it's just because they hold that position. When they're no longer out of that position, they don't have the ability to tell you what to do, or they don't have the right. And then we have charismatic authority, and this is when we listen to people because they have the charisma, or they have a personality, or there's something very persuasive about the way they deliver their message. And then in some cases, these things sort of overlap, right? So not only do they hold a position, but we're also willing to listen to them because they have the right, they have a personality, or in some cases, they may have a personality that makes them interesting, or that we're willing to listen to them, and then that puts them in certain places. So that was, I'm digressing. So a traditional authority might be Queen Elizabeth. It might mean deference to older people or elders. It might mean permission. That's one of the examples, I think, in your textbook, that back in, traditionally, you would have to get permission from your father, right, to get married, or you know what I mean. Okay, so that's just, it's not based on their position, it's not based on any rules, it's just custom, it's just what we do. Rational legal, this is somebody who is reasonably part of the law, often as part of a bureaucracy, but it's the position that gives this person the authority, not tradition. And once they're out of that position, then they no longer have the authority. So in this case, it would be actually 3 people on the screen would be considered people that, because of their place, I actually don't remember the elected position that Hitler was in, but certainly Clinton and Bush and Hitler had authority because of where they were. Maybe even your principal at your school, if you see the principal at the grocery store, they no longer can tell you what to do, or your former boss, right, can't really tell you what to do anymore. Maybe even your teacher, like outside of the classroom, the class is over, you don't have to do jack what they want you to do. Charismatic authority is where these begin to overlap, because charismatic authority is somebody that we listen to because they have this what we call the cult of personality. Oh, there it is right there on the handout, on the slide. But there's something about them that makes us want to listen to them. So the only 2 people left on the screen here are Jesus and Gandhi. And, both of those were considered sort of ideal types of the charismatic authority. I mean, Jesus was the son of a carpenter. Gandhi actually was an activist, and at some point he was a politician, but I believe his political career came after his. But two others on the screen are also considered to have charismatic authority in that they had this sort of way with people that made people want to listen to them. And that is Hitler and Clinton actually also fall under this sort of category of charismatic authority. And so, and there is some social scientists argue that we should be very careful of the charismatic personalities because sometimes we will do what sometimes they want us to do things that are not necessarily in our best interest. So you have a lot of serial killers fall into that category, like Jim Jones and various people like that. So that would be this one would be a fun little quiz to match up. Like, why do people listen to them? Right. I don't actually know anything about the Queen. I don't think she's considered to have a charismatic authority. It's not funny. Okay. So then this use of power, way society structure it, we structure it into different arrangements, government systems. That's what governments are. Governments are ways that groups, societies structure their distribution of power. Of course, you have a monarchy, which is when a family has all the power and all the authority. City-state, which is a fancy way of saying any kind of government. And commonly that's city-state is because the first geographical ways in which we exercised authority were cities. So like Rome would be an example, right? And then as they got larger, so the state is a generic term for government, but in ancient times, governments were only able to control people within a limited geographical distance. So if you couldn't literally be or have your people in a certain geographic region, you couldn't control them. And eventually that had to change. If you ever get into ancient history, talk about how city-states got larger and larger. So now we talk about nation states, right? And then a democracy is the one that we're most familiar with. And a democracy, what does it say, is power is held by the government. Okay, so the idea in a democracy, and hopefully you learned this in your civics class, is that the power is with the people. And I say the idea because there is reason to be critical or skeptical of the idea of a democratic model. But the democratic model says is that the people get to decide who will represent them. So by the way of vote. So a direct democracy is not all that common, but a direct democracy is a context where everyone gets equal votes. So maybe your family, if you do family meetings and people get to vote, maybe that would be an example of a direct democracy, where everyone's vote counts. We have very few instances in our democracy that are direct. Most of ours are representative democracies. Even here where I work, where you have members vote. Well, actually, I don't think we vote on anybody here, but maybe don't use that example. But like cities, where you would vote on someone to represent your interests. We all get to vote if you are of a certain age, right? And don't have any certain criminal background. We all get to vote, but we vote for people who will represent our interests. Even in my church, right? Even in my church, we elect elders to make decisions on our behalf. We don't all get to vote, right? We don't all get to actively participate in the rulemaking and in a democracy, you are only allowed to participate in the process of voting for the outcome or voting for your representatives if you hold what's referred to as citizenship. And citizenship simply means that your vote gets to legitimately be counted. There are different kinds of citizenship, right? You have something called universal citizenship, and that is simply based on geographical space. If someone is within these boundaries, they count, right? The same rights as everybody. In other instances, you have to like earn your citizenship, or you can have your citizenship taken away. So for example, in the United States, in some states, if you have a felony conviction, you lose the privileges that come with being a full citizen. You don't have the same privileges as everybody, including the right to vote, including, you know, the right to carry a weapon, those sort of things. So the idea of citizenship means that I have the privileges, I have the rights of, I have all of the rights that are granted to someone in this geographical space. And so examples of where that would be like not full citizenship might be you can't vote until you're 18, or until you can live in the United States, but until you take your citizenship exam, you don't have the privileges of actually see. And this is where some of my knowledge about some of that gets sort of limited. Okay, I hope that makes some sense. But again, the idea of a democracy is that all the people participate, and yeah. Okay, totalitarianism is when you have a small group of people. You can have a dictator, which would be one person, or a small group of people, that would be an oligarchy. Sometimes that's a family, sometimes that's a military gang, or yeah, military group, and they control all aspects of our life, right? They have total control over the media, the laws of the land, over the way money gets used, over how women can dress, how men can dress, where they can go, right? And so the idea is that in a democracy, the people have some say in these rules. But in a totalitarian system, they don't really care about the people. So you can use both of these examples, even if you want to think about your family life, right? In a family life where what dad or mom says go, they don't care about what the kids say, that would be an example of a totalitarian regime, right? In a democracy, where people have some say and they all get to vote at the dinner table, that could also be something that you might see in your family structure. I hope I haven't made that more confusing. Okay, it's after 10 minutes, so I'm going to stop right here, if I can figure out how.